This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
To me, abundance isn't just about what's in your pantry. It's also about how you care for yourself. That's why I appreciate Azure Well. They offer vitamins and supplements focused on purity, potency, and consistency, helping support a wellness routine built for the long haul. When you're intentional about what you put in your body, small choices add up over time. Visit AzureLivingWell.com to shop and learn more. That's AZURE livingwell.com. These products have not been evaluated by the FDA and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasting.
Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. This is a special episode on the true crime book written by Katherine Canavan, Killer in the House, which you are all familiar with by now. It has been my latest trilogy, and this book is a perfect summer read. So I encourage you to pick it up for yourselves. There are links on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com. Now, this book really caught my attention because I wasn't familiar with the case, which you know is one of the things I enjoy, learning about new things. And this all went down less than an hour from where I live, though 50 years ago. I am old enough to have heard about this, but I had not until Killer in the House was published in February 2026. So my guest, Katherine Canavan. She is a veteran journalist of the highest integrity with a penchant for writing historical true crime. Her first book was Lincoln's Final Hours, Conspiracy, Terror, and the Assassination of America's Greatest President. Her second book is True Crime Philadelphia, From America's First Bank Robbery to Real-Life Killers Who Inspired Boardwalk Empire, the HBO series that I watched faithfully from 2010 to 2014. However, it is her newest book, Killer in the House, that has captured my interest today. This work examines a spree murder of the Abt family, and it is meticulously researched, providing rich details and context. It allows readers to understand the crime, the survivors, the investigation, and the impact on Bucks County, Pennsylvania, if not the whole state of Pennsylvania. My guest, Katherine Canavan, is a veteran journalist with a career spanning Florida, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. She has been honored as the National Health Journalism Fellow at the Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism, the University of Southern California, and was recognized as a Delaware Individual Artist Fellow for her research and writing. Katherine has appeared on PBS, on C-SPAN 3, and the Discovery Channel. Her work has been featured in publications such as USA Today, The Daily Beast, and the History News Network. Notably, she has reported a story at gunpoint and successfully negotiated the surrender of a killer involved in a 5-state manhunt. All right, I find her to be absolutely fearless, and I love her compelling historical true crime books. Katherine does not write in a bubble. She enriches her narrative by including another horrific murder, case of Edward and Marguerite Volgenberger, both 77 years old, who were killed in Langhorne, Pennsylvania, just 10 minutes away from the apt murder scene on the same date, March 12, 1976. The apt murders are particularly chilling because the killer broke into a family home in the middle of the day. He laid in wait for hours before the first family member returned home and then killed. Katherine, who was a reporter at the time, provided eyewitness accounts of the investigation as it unfolded, and she utilized extensive documentation and interviews from both 1976 and into the 2020s to reconstruct the full story for us now. So I'd like to welcome Katherine Canavan to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I think it'll be fun.
I think so. I loved the way you wove the story, main story, but you're able to bring the others into it in such a way that you're providing a tremendous amount of context. You were an eyewitness, and that is really critical. That is really one of the reasons I liked this so much. It was so well done. And you took so much time with the family, all the families. Wow, it was powerful.
Thank you, Jill. And in order to have the whole person, you've got to be truthful even about the person's foibles.
Well, I think that makes people more relatable. If you only chose positive adjectives, none of us is just positive adjectives.
Yeah, right.
We have our flaws. We're human beings. We make mistakes. We can get grumpy. I think you found a very solid balance between what happened to these people who encounter this person in their home.
I had a signing at a Barnes & Noble not too far from the murder house. And Michael's best friend growing up brought him, and people would come over and say, I knew Michael act. And I'd say, actually, Michael's here. Do you want to? And he was hugging people, and people are back in his life.
It's like a reunion. And now he has all these people around him. That's absolutely phenomenal.
Just seeing him, with Margie's best friend who came to the signing, and police officers who had helped him back then, and just all kinds of people.
That is marvelous. That lifts the spirit, that lifts the heart. As true crime can be very tough, these stories just are gut-wrenching. These are the worst days of people's lives that I wind up focusing in on. But that also happens. There's that silver lining that you're hoping for. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Also, no one would understand. You have to understand the byplay and why people might be suspicious of this person or that person.
But you have a sense of what happened. What was the crime? How was literally it executed?
Well, Jill, I needed the details in the autopsies to find out, how Michelle and where his wallet was and what he was wearing, sadly.
Yes, you do. It wasn't gratuitous violence. It was necessary to tell the story honestly, objectively, what happened. And I think you hit it out of the park.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot.
I felt like you honored the St. Bernard, Heidi.
I know I never saw Heidi. Well, I did see Heidi being carried away, but I never saw Heidi in life. But I love that the people in Trevose often shorten your name. If your name is Maria, you're Rhea. So Heidi was Hi. I love that.
Yeah. I think if anyone's a dog lover, a pet lover, an animal lover, they become part of your family.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you could visualize reading it, how Heidi came tearing down those stairs. Who is this person? I'm going to defend my family.
Mm-hmm.
And Heidi's lost. But that to me was also a clue. But very early in the book, in the investigation, you have the police canvassing the neighborhood. And they're, did you see anything? Did you hear anything? And people are no, no, no. But they also knew no one heard Heidi barking like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And Heidi would have barked at a stranger. So, and I was not familiar with the case, and I did not look it up. And I said, well, it had to be someone from the neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
See what happens when you read 50 years of this stuff? You start to pick up on little clues like that. But to me, that was a big clue. And I was like, huh. It was lovely that you cared enough to pay attention to Heidi.
She was a St. Bernard, and she was 10. I think that Rich Fink was interesting when he told George, I've forgotten how he said it, but basically, I can't get you off. You killed a St. Bernard, and her name was Heidi. And George understood. It was a lot,
You went and you killed the dog. You're not going to get forgiven for that. I get it.
He's the dog from the Topper show. He's the shaggy dog. They really were beloved, especially during that period. That was kind of a breed that everyone loved.
Well, I remember watching, I guess it was Bugs Bunny. They used to have the St. Bernard with the barrel to their neck, and they would run to go, rescue the person. And occasionally on the cartoon, he would take it off and pour himself a martini and then forget about the person and head back down to wherever they were going. Even as a kid, you giggled because you were like, oh, here's this rescue dog. And here's Heidi. Oh, poor Heidi. I wanted to ask you, because this has come up in a number of books that I've read, that you have this person charged with all of these murders. I get the public defenders, and they're crucial to our judicial system. And the defense attorney has never done a homicide case. He's never been to court for that.
Mm-hmm. Geschwendt really lucked out with Rich Fink because he was able to find two of the top experts on insanity and criminal trials in the country and convinced them, they didn't want to, he convinced them to testify in Geschwendt's defense. And I think everybody who wants the justice system to be equitable would want someone more experienced as a general rule. But I think there's a political glitch there because James Q. Wilson pointed out once that in Europe, most laws are done at a national level. But here in the United States, they're done at a county or a state level. So local DAs are elected. So they're beholding to their constituents. And are you going to be the politician who says mass murderers need better defenses?
And I do not mean to defame Rich Fink. Like you said, he found the experts. He brought them in. I think he presented a very good case. I guess you rise to the occasion when you have to be the best defense attorney ever you do.
I do think George got a good defense. But how do you balance 6 lives plus Heidi?
Yeah. I mentioned that you did such a wonderful job with defining for us the victims, but you do a great job with George too. I felt so bad for George the child growing up in that abusive family. I felt like everything he did to try to improve his lot did not work out. It was roadblock after roadblock. You got the sympathy going. I do feel really, really bad for that child. I do not feel bad for the murderer.
Well, I do remember in the court case when they presented one of the psychiatrists who said that George had never been hugged or kissed by another human being. It was just stunning. People just sat there like kind of trying to get that through their minds because you think that all babies have been hugged, but apparently not.
So if you're just meeting basic needs, food, change, warm, hot, done, that's it. Well, you're going to grow up withdrawn. And he certainly was. I mean, I don't think that's an exaggeration.
No. However, all of his siblings grew up and led productive lives, were parents, grandparents.
Well, I do think he probably had schizophrenia. That was the working theory.
Yes.
Just because the descriptions when he was thought that it was Heidi who was deliberately pooping on his lawn, that he thought he saw them in the windows laughing. That's delusional thinking. You can even say that's hallucination. That if you think you're seeing someone in the window, I don't believe for a second that they were deliberately, Heidi, here, we're going to take your poop and throw it on his lawn. I think they really gave George a thought. Honestly, like most people didn't give George a thought. He's interpreting, and it's ironic because in his mind, he is almost the center of the App family's world, that everything they're doing, saying, driving, playing a radio in the car, it's all directed at him. And that's delusional thinking.
Yeah, well, I thought that one of the things that Rich Fink said was that, he didn't have anyone in his world except the apps had been kind to him for a period of years. And he said, who do you blame when things go wrong? Well, nobody blames themselves. You blame someone else. And the apps were literally the only people outside his family he knew.
Yeah. Even some of the police officers he went to high school with and really never said they had a conversation with him, or, they were in the same math classes, I think it was. And the interviews we did with them was also wonderful.
I was very lucky because they were all just very generous with their time, and they just had these wonderful personalities where, they saw things through different lenses. And I was just very lucky. I thought it was fascinating, though, that Clifford, the survivor, and Bill Fox, who later became a policeman, and Geschwendt, who later became a killer, sat 1, 2, 3 in math class. And what are the odds that you have the policeman, the doer, and the survivor sitting for a year right next to each other?
Right. And then you move 10 years ahead, and here you are in this horrendous situation. It's just incredible. Hey, I started on this and then I got off again, but I want to circle back because we were talking about putting yourself into the book and you were reluctant. I understand, as a consumer who reads, whether it's newspapers, online, whatever, what reporters did. But my God, you were talking to suspects on the phone, going out to meet them, trying to run into the girlfriend of a suspect with police pulling guns on you. I mean, you're the bravest person I know. Good Lord.
Oh, I think a lot of things you just muddle into and you do the best you can. I was a new reporter, so I was learning.
Yes.
And I really did want to get good stories.
Yes, well, you really did. Holy mackerel. You got in trouble with the police chief.
Yes. Yeah, he threatened to have me arrested for aiding and abetting, which, I didn't feel I did. But I was simply trying to follow a story.
Kudos to you. This is, back in the 70s. Women's lib had not come all the way around yet. So you were out there, the cheerleader blazing the path for so many that came later. Well, thank you. I call it brass oval.
Well, long before that, other people blazed the path for the reporters of the 70s. I think journalists in the 30s and the 40s did some amazing things. And I think that reporting is different than some jobs because your name is on the top of the story. And if you're a child care worker or if you make electronic parts, your name isn't on the top of anything. And you forget that your name is on the top of things. And I was covering a really sensational case and people were not crazy about the paper covering it. And I went to a party with a friend, and he knew people. I didn't know anybody at the party, and they didn't know who I was. And I was sitting on the couch, and somebody started talking. People were talking about the news, and somebody started talking about that girl reporter and how she should be fired for what she's writing. And I thought, ooh, this is a bad time to introduce myself. So we just looked at each other. We left in a few minutes. But I was shocked because I had no idea that people identified you with your story. It was simply work. As a teacher, you go to work and you do certain things and you leave. And that's how I thought of reporting, but apparently not in that case.
I think it was much more personal, that's for sure. Today, there's so much out there. Names are out with no sense of consequence. I know that's a concern I have with the true crime community, that we can be such a compassionate group of people who seek advocacy and want to get to the truth and want to see justice done. And then you have people who are more irresponsible, in my view, who, say Bobby Smith is the killer. Here's his address and let's go talk to him. And it just doesn't work that way. What if he is being investigated and now you put it out there and really put a whole crimp in the investigation? Don't do that. Having some sense of compassion. What if you're wrong? You're reading something on the internet. Stop. Don't blast people's names all over the place. Let the police do that. Have your theories, but you don't have to be naming people and outing them when they may have nothing to do with anything.
Also, if Bobby is the killer, you probably shouldn't go to his apartment.
Yeah, can you imagine? Oh my heaven. Yeah, that might not be a good idea at all. I know Paul Holes, he was involved in the Golden State Killer investigation. He was saying that his time was up, he was about to retire, and there was this one guy that they really hadn't gotten a bead on, this Joseph D'Angelo guy. And he pulled up in front of his house and he said, I can just walk up to the door, tell him what I want, get a DNA sample, and we can move this thing along. And he didn't do it. And Joseph D'Angelo was the Golden State Killer. So, don't go to the guy's door. He may not like that if he is the killer. And if he's not the killer, you're really hurting somebody's life. Don't do that.
I had the advantage, I guess, of viewing it 47 years later. So hindsight was very helpful. And another thing that I kind of always wondered, what happened to the people on Fleetwood Avenue? Because it was a very intense 10 days. And of course, then the lead up to the trial, the death penalties. But that 10-day search for the killer was very intense. You had people answering their doors with dogs and shotguns, and one man kept an axe by his door. People were so frightened that one of the detectives, Bob Eckert, he told me he had to bring a uniformed officer with him just so people would let him interview them about what they saw on the street. So it was such a incredibly tense time. But going back, it was like getting into a time machine, being a real choosy time traveler. You went back and, first I researched everything. I mean, it took me about 2 years to find the original police notes, the autopsy reports, George Geschwendt's identity confession, very, very detailed confession. The prison records, the school records, all the court transcripts, of course. And I did that. I researched all that. And then I went back to talk to the people on the street again. And they were very kind to put me in touch with other people who were still alive, who were parts of the case. And I love interviewing people 47 years later whom I had interviewed in 76, because now we aren't all in our 20s and 30s. We're all in our 70s and 80s. And your perspective changes so much.
Yeah.
You still remember it. One of the things, we didn't really know each other that well. We simply all were in the same place at the same time. But going back almost 50 years later, you realize there's a common thread. We all worked on that case in some way, or lived on that street. And many of us lived in Trevose. So it was the biggest thing most of us ever worked on.
Yeah.
And you remember the biggest thing you ever worked on. And 50 years later, you're very willing to talk about it because it's interesting for you too to see how other people reflected on it. What was your understanding of this?
That must have been fascinating.
It really was. And again, the people were just so kind to put me in touch with other people. And the story I wanted to tell originally was just 2 multiple murders happening during the same days at the same time and 4 miles apart in really safe suburbs. Trevose was so safe that the kids used to have big sleepovers in the summertime in an empty lot. They'd all bring their sleeping bags and just sleep under the stars. Now, that's a pretty safe neighborhood. And Langhorne, where the Vogenbergers were killed, is this beautiful old colonial town. You would never think anything bad would happen in Langhorne, and certainly not on the Vogenberger farm. It was this Victorian farmhouse with a fruit stand and beautiful barns. But all of a sudden you have these 2 77-year-olds who are being tasered, and tasers were just a year old then. So it was very bizarre for most readers to read. They didn't know what they were.
Right.
The detective who found them didn't know what had happened. He just saw these arrows sticking out of their legs. He had no idea that they had been shot by a weapon that was meant to be used by air marshals, but it didn't work. It did work. The government went with pat downs and all that instead, so it didn't sell. But then in Trevose, you have this family coming home expecting nothing but a Friday night fish fry. And instead, there's a man behind the wall killing them one at a time, then dragging their bodies to the basement, and then coming up and cleaning up so he could fool his next victim. The paper girl who actually came to the door and knocked and did not go in, luckily for her. The paper girl had a great line when I interviewed her. She's now retired. But she said that it was just an ordinary day, except there was a killer behind the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
How close did she come to being a victim herself? My God. When you think about that, again, you talk about the impact this has on the community. Holy mackerel, the near misses.
The reason I wanted to include both multiple murders, well, because it was so strange that they happened 4 miles apart in safe suburbs, but also you kind of had to be there. If you could board a time machine and go back, you'd realize that the weekend of March 12th, 1976, you had newspaper headlines about the App murders, and such a murder so strange that it inspired 2 episodes of TV's Criminal Minds. But you also had the Vogenberger murders. They weren't discovered for a day, but they were done during the exact same hours. And the killers were not related. They didn't have any idea what each other was doing during those hours. But for the people who were there in Langhorne and Trevose, it wasn't 6 people killed. It was 8 people killed, and nobody knew when it was going to end. Would it be 10 people or 12 people? I tried to capture that fear.
Seriously, you wake up, there's 6 people dead. You wake up, there's 2 more people dead. You have to think there's one killer running around, because if there's not, and they aren't related, there's 2 killers running around in this idyllic, quaint little communities slaughtering people. What the hell is going on? I don't blame people for not opening the door and having to bring a cop to give statements. I get it. Remember, I think it was like last summer, we had a bunch of convicts escape, and there was a manhunt going on. You know, like you're on edge listening to this. And
Absolutely.
The investigation, it's that epicenter, and then they're not caught, so they're moving out. And then they caught 2, but the rest were still missing. I think it was like 8 to 10, something like that. And it got down to this last guy. I had the heebie-jeebies. I can't relate because this is going on in these people's neighborhoods, but I can relate in the sense of there's something out there. I don't know where it is. It's coming my way. Who is this person? Are they going to get him? Oh my gosh.
The fear in Bucks County was heightened because the Vogenbergers, robbers, because they did tear everything apart. The police were quite sure they were there to rob the couple. The robbers, because they tortured them with something, with a taser gun, something that was unknown to most newspaper readers at the time, it had a one-off element. And so did the App murders. No one expects when you get off the middle school bus and come home, you open your door and go to put your coat in the living room closet, that somebody will be lying in wait for you. They both had these very bizarre elements. So people just, their socks were scared off at the time. And I lived in a little cabin that I rented on a cliff over a creek about 1.8 miles from the Apt house. Actually, it was about halfway between the Apt and the Vogenberger murder scenes. But I realized it then. I didn't map it out until 47 years later. But I was 25, so of course I thought I was invincible. So it never occurred to me, even after the second murder, that anything would happen to me in my little cabin, remote cabin over a creek in the woods. But most people who were parents, who had children, but were very frightened because 2 bizarre murders, even the police, they didn't know if these 2 things were connected. So they tested it at different times of the day. They went back and forth between the App murder house and the Vogenberger murder house. And it took different amounts of time at different times of the day, obviously. But one of the detectives said, we thought, holy God, could these be connected?
Mm-hmm.
They were not, but you can just imagine the fear in the community.
Well, you almost want them to be connected, so there's one person that's dangerous out there. But the modus operandi are so dramatically different.
Mm-hmm. There was just one odd red herring, and that was there was a size 9D boot, work boot from Sears in the dust in the Vogenberger's attic. The attic had been ripped apart. They were looking for money they expected the couple had hidden. And the exact same boot type, same size, was found in the basement, in the blood in the basement in the Apt house. But they were totally unrelated. I guess it was a popular work boot from Sears.
Work boot or a common size, but that's enough to light your hair on fire worrying about that one. It was incredible. I loved and appreciated also that you gave me the update. Normally when I'm doing a book, I have to go out and I have to do all this research and find out what happened to this one. Oh, bless your heart. You did not make me do that. You went through everybody. And I loved what happened with the Volkenbergers' land. Even if it remains unsolved to this day. But what happened to that property is wonderful.
Yeah, the townspeople were able to raise enough money to buy it and turn it into an art center. And it's a lovely property.
That is wonderful. Having concerts and gardens and flowers, and it's a living tribute to them.
Yeah, and I love that one of the artists paints Mrs. Vogenberger into her paintings.
Yeah, it's just lovely. I appreciated hearing what happened to the officers. These were the beginning of a lot of careers, it seemed.
Yeah, very much. What I found fascinating about this was, we're familiar with the Idaho case and so many other recent murders where they've had all kinds of technology. But these people, very small band, I think it was 10 detectives, solved this in 10 days. And they didn't even have cell phones. They had to carry rolls of dimes in their police car compartments to stop and use a payphone if they didn't want to broadcast something to everyone over the police radio. They had no street cameras. They had no DNA. They had no Ring doorbells, nothing. And they were able to do it. And I'm especially awed by Detective Zajac and the polygraph examiner, Dick Batesel, because I included in the book sort of a transcript of what they said to get George Geschwendt to confess. And they went right up to the line of what you could say, but they did not go over it. And they finally got to the question that made all the answers flow out of George, which was everyone sees things from their own perspective. And the question that Batesel asked was, what did they do to you, George, to make you do this? And
yes,
everything just came flowing out of George. Officer Dave Klee, he found the bodies. He said, George might be free today if he just hadn't opened up. But he did, and he totally overshared. He told every detail of what he did. He even went with the officers the next day. He took his motorcycle and stuffed it with all the incriminating evidence and drove to Washington's Crossing. And Washington's Crossing is a national park in Bucks County, pretty close to the crime scene. And he went there and he dropped his boots and everything in the Delaware River. Well, he even agreed to go back with them and show them where he dropped the stuff. And they even brought an extra boot to see where it might flow so they could see where they might send divers to find the original boot. They didn't. But the fact that he trusted them enough to go with them, and, they also stopped at McDonald's for him. The fact that, their questions were so well structured that he held nothing back.
Well, if the last people you really had a meaningful conversation with were the Apt boys when you were 10, 12, 13 years old, and now you have someone asking you, what did they do, George? Yeah, that balloon popped and it spilled out of him. They were able to push that button, and I'm glad they got to the confession. But the psychology is painful. Watching, seeing that unfold.
Well, I think another thing that it was a factor was Ted Zajac was just a wonderful, very dedicated detective who worked for Ben Salem Township, the police department. And he was so dedicated. His wife told me a lot of times he'd just forget to eat when he worked on a case because he just had blinders on. He was looking at his material and that. And he wasn't a grandstander. He didn't hold press conferences. He just worked. And she said that he had an amazing ability to sense when somebody was lying, even in social situations. She said, like, they would go someplace and she'd say, oh, he seems like a nice guy. And he'd be like, nah, there's something up with that guy. And
not really.
He was usually right. He had a personality, and I'm not sure if I got this across in the book, but he had a very likable personality. He didn't suck up to anyone, but he was kind of a quiet guy. But you got the feeling he agreed with you, even though he never said he did. There was something very calming about it. And I think that a criminal would really relate to that. He just gave you the idea he got you. And I think that George probably was somehow affirmed by him.
Well, he needed that. For George, it's not great to be exposed that way, but at the same time, he was not well. They had to get to the truth here. They had to unlock his confession.
They're working at a disadvantage because it was the 70s and, they didn't have the DNA. They couldn't use a lot of the methods that people could now. So they knew they couldn't let him just shut up and go home.
No.
They had to get a confession. And they did it legitimately and well.
Yeah. They followed procedure. They crossed the T's, dotted the I's, and they got the confession from him. The rest is history.
Somebody said it was lucky that there was no Law and Order then, because if George had seen episodes of Law and Order, he would have known not to say a word until he had a lawyer.
Yeah, really. I worry sometimes that a lot of the shows are tipping off criminals on how to be better criminals. Well, they're still getting caught, so something's going right. But there is, like you said, so much more technology today.
One of the things that a lot of people asked me about was what it was like to be in the house after the murders. But, and certainly I noticed that myself. I always tried to ask quickly, and it's crazy. The area where George crouched and waited for people, there was like a 17, 18-inch space between where you walked into the living room door and the family's upright piano. And that's where he sort of hid. And he had kind of a bird's eye view of things from there because there were several living room windows and he could also peek through the kitchen windows from there if he were to bend forward. And it was strange. That was the only part of the house that I just kind of stayed away from. And I realized later I never saw anybody near that piano or that wall. Everyone congregated on the other side of the room, but not on that wall.
Nobody tested out to see how it would feel to squeeze into that little crevice and have the killer's eye view.
I did that, but I only did it for seconds, and I did it more or less to measure the space because I found that you really can't rely on other people's measurements all the time, and you want to be correct.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Curiosity would have driven me to see what he was seeing.
Yeah, but it's also a very one-off thing to do, and it does bother you when you do it.
Oh, yeah. You're getting chills just thinking about it.
There were just so many things where, people kept saying they got goosebumps thinking about that. And I didn't get goosebumps, but you just realize how unusual it is to be in this house and the graciousness of the survivors to allow reporters, myself, other reporters, into the house during what had to be the worst week of their lives.
Oh, yeah.
And there were just so many one-off things that happened. I remember sitting in the trial and Clifford Act, the elder brother who was a survivor, was sitting in the front row right behind the bar. and he had his fist clenched, and he kind of was holding it up to his mouth. And the judge started to explain in which case the death penalty would apply and in which case it would be a life sentence. And he said, and you must judge it as a life sentence if blank, blank, blank. And Clifford just shook his head no in the front row. And I thought, I wonder if all the jurors or most of the jurors that I could say were all looking directly at Clifford. And I thought, I'd never seen that in a criminal trial where someone was shaking his head no. I'm thinking, would that influence them? And, I'm guessing it did.
Yeah, it may. What is seen cannot be unseen.
Well, they came back with 6 guilty verdicts, so.
They didn't take a whole lot of time either.
Yeah, it was just, there were so many things that you think, well, that's never going to happen again. For instance, when they announced the death penalty, Michael and Clifford's friends jumping up and cheering and joking and trying to make the noise that an electric chair makes. Just all sorts of things like that you think, I'm never going to hear this again.
Mm-hmm.
This probably will never happen.
And here we are, hearing about it through this book that you've written. Katherine, I want to ask you, what's next? Taking a breather, going to find another case?
Actually, I wrote another book while I was waiting for this one to be published. I can't say a lot about my next book, but I'm really excited about it. It's going to focus on whatever happened to famous murder houses.
Ooh.
From Hawaii to New York. And again, was ridiculously lucky. I talked with people who bought the houses after the crimes. And real estate agents who did walkthroughs while the police markers were still in place.
Oh, my Lord.
Police officers who found the bodies. Phil Hartman's house, Dorothy Stratton, the house where Dorothy Stratton was killed. John Benet Ramsey's, Phil Spector's castle, the Golden State Killer's own house. And Dr. Sam Shepard, he inspired The Fugitive. I think there are almost 24 others.
Wow.
And it was so interesting to talk with Dr. Randall Bell. Rolling Stone called him the master of disaster. He valued all of Jeffrey Epstein's properties. He valued the Hale-Bopp Comet house, the John Benet Ramsey house, just a litany of others of really interesting houses. And he was so kind to take time to talk to me. The police officer who found, what's her name? Candy's victim, Candy, the miniseries, Candy.
Yes.
The police officer who found the body in the laundry room.
Oh, my gosh.
And a neighbor who was right behind him when he found the body. Just so many interesting people, victims, families spoke to me. So it made for, I think it's going to make for a wonderful book to read for anyone who likes real estate and crime. I do.
I think it's really, really cool. Please let me know when it's out, because I'm going to want to get that.
It should be out by this time next year.
Ooh, we'll have to do this again.
Really, again, murder is not fun, but it was great fun to do that book and to talk to so many interesting people from across the, all the way to Hawaii. And one that was fun was a man who had been in the Amityville Horror House when he was in high school because his friend's parents owned it before the DeFeo family. And later, his brother bought it after the murders, long after the murders. So it was just real fun.
Listen, it sounds like fun. Murder is not fun. It's tragic. It's awful. But again, if you can take something like that and then tie the real estate together and who's there now. And that's very cool. What an interesting concept. I love it.
I really like real estate. And I've written so much about murder that combining them just seemed like a no-brainer.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right there. I'm looking forward to that. Hey, is there anything else you want to add?
I think just the fact that coming back to it 47 years later and finding those people who I liked then, and I realized that this one event was the biggest, most unexpected, most one-off, surprising event of all of our lives.
Which created that common bond between you two.
And again, they were so gracious.
That's wonderful.
One thing we didn't talk about that I just thought about was the funeral. And
we did not.
And I think that's really important because they had to find 36 pallbearers. I mean, to me, that's stunning.
They had to find all the hearses.
Right. Yeah, there were 4. The undertaker didn't have enough hearses. They had to get what they call livery service. They had to rent them from other funeral directors.
I mean, the scope it's staggering.
St. Dominic's, this lovely church in Northeast Philadelphia. I remember being in the graveyard, which is kind of hilly, and seeing the first hearse come over the horizon, and then another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. And then they realized that there were so many hearses that they had to back them all up because they had passed by the gravesite.
Oh.
And what I found most poignant about it was that Peggy App, 25 years earlier, had walked down that big aisle at St. Dominic's on her wedding day.
Yeah.
And now her casket's being wheeled up it along with her husbands and their 2 daughters and their son. And her cousin is delivering her eulogy.
I don't know how you could get through the eulogy. Here, this whole family is nearly wiped out. The sight of it had to just be devastating.
There's so many touching things. Some of the survivors' friends couldn't afford suits to go to the funeral. So they waited in the back of the church. There's a vestibule, but it's pretty cold. And in March, it was March 17th. It's pretty cold vestibule. And they waited there just to pay their respects to Michael and Clifford. And it was really heartbreaking. And again, the killer was still on the loose. Yeah. So a patrolman was taping, or I guess it was video. I'm not sure. He was taping the entire service, wondering if the killer might show up. He didn't. He was out applying for a job that day. Michael and Clifford were there sitting separately. Clifford was still technically under police purview, but a tremendously sad day.
We didn't mention Gary Engel.
Yeah, Gary Engel.
And I don't want him to be forgotten in this because so is the absence. Gary was very much a victim there.
Yes. Gary, as his friend said, stuck like glue to Margie, and they'd been dating for 2 years. He went there that night to celebrate their anniversary. He was going to take her out to Rustler Steakhouse, which was a popular low-price chain back in the 70s. And, he walked up to the door and, he could have left, but he didn't. He walked in and he became the last victim.
Yeah. And he, of course, had his own funeral with his own family because he didn't have the same plot at the same cemetery. So while that's all going on, there's a 6th funeral. Oh.
And then, of course, there's the Vogenberger's funeral in the Friends Cemetery in Langhorne.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. The scope is it staggers the imagination. And I mean, I've read the book cover to cover, and it's still, I know I'm not fully grasping that many. You hear it, the numbers, and it's so outside of anything normal.
yeah, and all of the people in Bucks County who lived through it, never forget it. Gary Mitchell, who lived on the street, he lived about a block away. In fact, the Mitchell house was so similar in layout to the Apt house that the police borrowed their schematics for the trial. And Gary was in a restaurant one day, and somebody brought up the Apt killings, and a man said, "What is that?" And he said, "Oh, 6 people were killed up the hill on March 12th, 1976. And the man said, "Well, how could you possibly remember the date?" And he said, "Look it up." So everyone has a phone now, of course. So the man did, and Gary was right. And the guy was really taken aback. And he said, "Wow, how'd you remember that?" And he said, "I lost 2 good friends that day." He was 12 when it happened.
Yeah. You talk about a path dividing in people's lives, whether it was George, the killer, or someone like him living in town. And forevermore, you're going to remember this was before the spree killing, and this is after the spree killing. And it's a hard line in someone's timeline.
Yeah. One of the women I talked to, a volunteer at the fire company, she said everybody remembers it. It was like our moonshot. Everybody who's lived here forever remembers it because nothing like that ever happened here before. The thing that I carry with me, I remember that the thing that I remember the best is when Michael and Clifford learned that it was the guy across the street, 121 feet away, who killed their parents. And their friend Buddy said, it was Geschwendt. It was Geschwendt. And Michael said, "What about him?" He said, "It was Geschwendt. Geschwendt killed your parents." And there was just this, in the book, I describe it as a doleful gasp. But it was just this sad, sad gasp from the living room you could hear. And then, of course, Michael and Clifford ran out the door toward the Geschwendt house. But I don't think I'll ever forget that sound. It was just so sad.
Yeah. It's such a complicated thing. It really is. Oh God, poor Michael and Clifford. You have a whole family, siblings, holidays, birthdays, how every birthday, every milestone hit brings this up.
And, you have 5 family members. That's a lot of birthdays. And now, and also Gary, who's, a really close friend.
Yeah. Dan, listen, I want to thank you for being on the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast.
Thank you for letting me join you, Jill.
Oh, I'm so excited to cover your book, and I can't wait for people to get to the store and buy it. There are links on my blog to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and wherever.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's really been nice meeting you.
Yes, you too. And I'm very much looking forward to the next book. It just sounds like such a romp.
I'll let you know. Yeah, actually, it really, I don't think I've ever written anything I enjoyed more because I got to meet so many exciting people.
That's good. I can't wait to read it. I'm really excited about this. Really, I invite you on. We will talk in 1 year.
I'll let you know as soon as it comes out.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you so much. Murder Bookies, I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Katherine Canavan as much as I did, and my trilogy on her book. She is a brave, resourceful, and insightful woman with stories galore. And please check out her book, Killer in the House, as a must-read on your summer list. I see you as you hear me. I truly appreciate your input because I really can't do this without you, nor do I want to. Please take a moment to leave a fantastic 5-star review because it's going to help me to attract future murder bookies. Share your thoughts with me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com or connect with me on X, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You will find all the links and sources on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com. Additionally, you can join our monthly Patreon Zoom for $2 a month, $4 if you really love me, at www.patreon.com/MurderShelfBookClub. So stay tuned in and subscribe so you will not miss my next episode, which will drop shortly. Make sure you lock your doors and windows. Trust your gut.
Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.